Now we turn to the United States. A 21-year-old man has been charged for killing 10 people in Monday's supermarket shooting in Colorado. It's the second deadly gun attack in the nation in a week. President Joe Biden has called for a revision of gun laws. Hendrik Sabrandi reports from Boulder.
I'm going to read the names of the deceased. Denny Strong, 20 years old.
Boulder Police Chief Maris Harold performed a ritual that's become all too common after mass shootings in the U.S., identifying the 10 people who died in a hail of gunfire at this King Soopers grocery store on Monday afternoon. Eyewitnesses say the gunman opened fire outside of the store before moving inside. Shoppers literally ran for their lives towards the back of the building in a desperate attempt to escape.
I just heard a big bang, and I was like, it's kind of weird. Like, I didn't know if it was like a gunshot or whatever, but it was like probably 3 seconds before we heard another just like bang, 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 and I immediately sprinted over to her. And
it was definitely panic. I think a lot of people just didn't know like exactly where he was or where he was going to be.
51-year-old Eric Talley, an 11-year Boulder Police Department veteran, was one of the first officers to confront the shooter. He was struck and killed during a volley of gunfire. The suspect, bloodied and barely clad, eventually surrendered and was led away in handcuffs. Colorado, which has seen its share of shooting massacres over the years, including those at Columbine High School and Aurora Movie Theater, is now grieving the same way all over again.
You know, my heart aches today, and I think all of ours does, as Coloradans, as Americans, for the senseless tragedy, the loss of life, as we hear those names.
Ever since the shootings, people have been leaving flowers and messages along the fence that's been erected outside the store, outside the crime scene. Also a ritual after these types of events. The victims, including the fallen officer, range from 20 to 65 years of age. No one besides the suspect was injured in the rampage.
Really what I'm doing here today is honoring the life of Officer Talley and showing my respect to all of the brave men and women that helped in this situation. To see something happen like this so close to home just really hurts a lot.
21-year-old Colorado resident Ahmad Alyssa is in custody, facing 10 counts of first-degree murder. No motive for the shootings has been uncovered yet. The investigation is just beginning. The new U.S. president says the need for new gun control measures is more critical than ever.
I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save the lives in the future, and to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act.
Families, a community, and a country rocked just last week by the shootings in Atlanta are all grieving again after yet another senseless attack. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Boulder, Colorado.
The shooting in Boulder was the 7th mass shooting in the U.S. in 7 days. The first was on Tuesday last week in Atlanta, Georgia. Police say a series of shootings left 8 dead. 6 were women of Asian descent. The following day in the city of Stockton, California, authorities said a drive-by shooting injured 5 people. Another shooting took place in Gresham, Oregon on Thursday. That attack left 4 injured. Then on Saturday, 3 mass shootings took place. One in Houston, Texas, injured 5. Another in Dallas, Texas, left 1 dead and another 7 injured. And one in Philadelphia in the state of Pennsylvania killed 1 and injured 5. That was followed by the tragedy in Boulder, Colorado, where 10 people were killed, as we just reported. Now, for more insight into this, let's cross live to Mr. Joseph Williams in Washington, D.C. He's the senior news editor of the U.S. News and World Report. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Williams. So it's quite unfortunate to say that gun violence happens in the United States frequently, but looking at the intensity of such violence in past 7 days, it's still quite stunning and horrifying. Do you think this time they will lead to a serious national reflection that will lead to actual changes?
It's kind of doubtful that actual political change will happen. Remember, back in 2012, we had 20 school children who died in a mass shooting, and no action was taken there, largely because even though the public is in favor of banning assault weapons and stricter controls on guns, the public is at odds with the Senate and the House. The political leaders here in the United States have had a very, very difficult time passing bipartisan legislation that will crack down on some of these shootings, not to mention the fact that there are already plenty of guns in circulation, and it seems to be the appetite is even growing as things get more and more anxious here in the United States.
So, talking about those legislation, those efforts on the ground, some are arguing that this issue has went into two extremes. One is too technical, and one is sometimes metaphysical. On the technical side, it gradually turned into who can own a gun rather than the ownership of guns itself. But on the metaphysical side, it looks like that freedom to own a gun it cannot be touched. So, what do you make of this dilemma?
It's something that's ingrained in the United States kind of fabric. It's in the country's DNA. I mean, the United States has always had a very profound love affair with weapons that seems no sign of abating. Certainly, part of the metaphysical argument that you're making is based a lot on paranoia and fear, that people are afraid of their security. They believe that crime is running rampant, and they believe that in order to protect themselves, they need weapons. Now, that being said, there is a criminal element here. Even though you have mass shootings that gain a lot of attention, you have everyday, quote unquote, everyday violence happening in large cities in the United States that rarely get mentioned, don't get nearly as much attention. That involves people shooting each other in large numbers that go one by one, but collectively add up to a really large number. So we have a two-level system of violence here, and both need to be addressed. But the fact that guns are so sacrosanct in America makes it very, very difficult to get any political traction on the issue.
Mr. Williams, that leads to a confusion for many outsiders like us. For example, if you talk about owning a gun is for defense, then in these mass shootings, we barely see any victims actually use a gun to defend himself or herself. And talking about Colorado, if we stretch the historical context a little bit, in Columbine High, Aurora movie theater, and this time in a supermarket, what kind of normal person will actually bear a gun into those public places?
You'd be surprised. Very many normal people would wear guns. There are many states that have open carry laws, and that means you can carry a sidearm in public view without having a permit or without having a license or without getting in any kind of trouble. It's kind of based on this mistaken notion that a good guy with a gun will stop a bad guy with a gun, when chances are, if you are the good guy with a gun and you're involved in a shooting, it's hard for police to sort out who's shooting at who. And the upshot of all of this is the fact that in the United States, we have more guns than we have people. There are about 365 million people in the United States, and we've got 395 million guns. That's a disproportionate number of guns. We have the largest per capita number of gun ownership in the world, and that is part of the issue. We have so many guns out there, we don't know who's buying them in large cases, and even those who are buying them, sometimes those guns end up in illegal hands. So we're trying to figure out a way to get a grip on this, but because the politics are so contentious, because we're so polarized as a nation, finding a solution that's acceptable to both sides of the political spectrum is going to be difficult, if not impossible.
So, since this is a highly polarized issue, and President Joe Biden has urged revisions to gun laws in the U.S., how much change he can make this time?
It remains to be seen, but more educated people than I am say that the opportunity for change is here, but the obstacles to change are quite drastic, dramatic, and in some cases immovable. The Republican Party, the right in the United States, is very much identified. They've identified themselves with firearms and the freedom to own them. So that's kind of part of their intractable notions of how they see themselves. And you're basically asking them to give up their identity and make change. And you have some moderate Democrats who are very much on the fence in this kind of an issue. So given those obstacles and given the fact that the Senate is very narrowly controlled, there aren't a whole lot of votes to spare on either side, to get to the required number of votes that would change this issue is a Herculean task. There aren't that many people out there who would go along with this, or aren't enough people out there who would go along with change to make actual lasting change happen. And even if change did happen, there are so many guns in circulation right now in the United States that it would probably not make that much of a dent, at least not presently. It might in the future, but in present, it probably would not.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Williams in Washington, D.C. You're watching Global Watch on CGTN. Still to come.